Welcome to Veiled Narrative Stories, where emotions breathe through words and love finds its voice even in silence. This is the beginning of a story not about falling in love, but about being found by it. The story of Isabella Hart, a woman who wasn't just running from love, she was running from herself. The morning air over Amalfi was scented with salt and lemon blossoms, a perfume only the sea could compose. Waves whispered softly against the cliffs, carrying secrets from distant shores. And there, among the cobbled lanes and sunlit terraces, stood a small, elegant art gallery, Luna Art. Its whitewashed walls gleamed like pearls, and the scent of oil paint lingered in the air like a memory that refused to fade. Inside, Isabella Hart moved quietly between her canvases. Every brushstroke she made seemed to bleed emotion. Not joy, not sorrow, but something deeper. Something unspoken. She painted not to create beauty but to hide behind it. Her life had become a symphony of solitude. Morning tea by the window, the soft hum of Italian radio, the brush dancing across canvas until dusk fell. She liked it that way, predictable, peaceful, untouched. She told herself she was free. Free from heartbreak, from promises that shattered, from the ache of loving someone who never stayed. But freedom can sometimes be just another name for loneliness. Every evening, when the last trace of sunlight kissed the ocean, Isabella would stand by her open window. Her hair, the color of midnight silk, would fall across her shoulders as she stared at the endless blue horizon. Somewhere inside that horizon, she imagined the pieces of her past drifting away, faces she once trusted, words that once meant everything. But no matter how far she ran, love had a way of finding those who least expected it, and it found her one rainy afternoon. The day had begun with thunderclouds rolling over the sea, painting the sky in shades of gray and silver. Rain fell in delicate ribbons, turning the cobblestones into mirrors of light. Isabella, lost in her thoughts, stood inside the gallery watching the world blur through raindrops on the windowpane. That's when she heard the doorbell, a soft chime that would change everything. He stepped in, shaking the rain from his hair, his camera slung across his shoulder. Ethan Knight, a travel photographer with eyes the color of storm clouds, deep, magnetic, full of stories untold. His presence filled the room like a gentle disturbance, the kind that makes silence meaningful. "Beautiful work," he said softly, his voice rich and calm. "Your paintings, they look like they're breathing." Isabella looked up, startled. No one had ever said that before. Most people admired her skill, but not her soul. Yet this stranger, with raindrops still clinging to his lashes, saw something deeper. She tried to smile politely, to keep her distance. "Thank you. The sea inspires most of my work." He walked closer, studying a canvas. A woman standing alone on a cliff, her hair wild, her eyes filled with longing. "She looks like she's waiting for something," he murmured. Isabella's voice dropped to a whisper. "Maybe she's waiting for a reason to stop running." Their eyes met. For a moment, the room went still. The rain, the waves, the world outside seemed to vanish. Ethan smiled, a slow, knowing smile that felt like sunlight after rain. "Maybe she's not running away," he said gently. "Maybe she's running towards something she doesn't recognize yet." That moment lingered, fragile, electric. She didn't know it then, but love had already entered her life, not with grand gestures or roses, but with quiet understanding and an unexpected glance. After he left, the scent of rain and cedarwood lingered in the air. Isabella stood by the door, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Her heart beat, not the slow rhythm of routine, but a wild, trembling flutter of possibility. She told herself it was nothing, just a stranger, just another traveler passing through. But her hands betrayed her. Trembling slightly as she cleaned her brushes, her mind echoing his words. That night, the waves seemed to whisper louder. The moon rose like a silent witness, casting silver across her paintings. And in that quiet room, Isabella painted again, not with fear, but with a sudden spark of life. Her brush danced like it had found its rhythm again. She didn't realize it yet, but something inside her had shifted. The woman who had been running from love was about to be chased by it. And love, this time, would not let her escape. The days after that rainstorm seemed softer somehow. The air smelled sweeter, the ocean looked calmer, and Isabella's world, once painted in muted grays, began to shimmer with quiet light. She didn't know why, but every morning she found herself glancing at the gallery door, as if waiting for that familiar chime. The soft ding that had once meant a customer now felt like a heartbeat she was beginning to miss. And then, one morning it came. Ethan Knight stepped inside, this time without the rain, but with the same storm in his eyes. He was wearing a white linen shirt, its sleeves rolled up, his camera hanging loose around his neck. There was something effortlessly confident about him, like a man who had made peace with the world and carried that peace wherever he went. "Back for another painting?" Isabella asked, pretending to sound indifferent. He smiled, a slow, disarming smile that could melt distance itself. "Maybe. Or maybe I came to capture something else." She tilted her head. "And what would that be?" He raised his camera slightly. "The woman who paints the sea as if it's alive." Her pulse quickened, though she hid it well. "I don't like being photographed. I don't take pictures," he replied softly. "I capture moments. The ones people don't realize are beautiful until they're gone." That line lingered in the air like a sigh. She looked at him, and for a second, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or longing that neither dared to name. That day he wandered through the gallery, studying her work with the kind of reverence most people reserved for prayer. He didn't just look, he saw. Each painting became a conversation. "This one," he said, standing before a painting of crashing waves, "feels like someone who's trying to forget." Isabella turned away. "Maybe some memories are too heavy to carry." He nodded thoughtfully. "And maybe that's why you paint them. To put them somewhere outside your heart." For she met his eyes again. For the first time, she didn't flinch. Days turned into a rhythm. A slow dance between two souls who didn't know they were already moving in sync. Ethan started coming to Luna Art every morning before the tourists arrived. Sometimes he brought her coffee, sometimes wildflowers from the cliffside. They talked about colors, about the way light changed at dawn, about the difference between capturing beauty and understanding it. And slowly, her walls began to crack. He told her about his travels, the deserts of Morocco, the temples of Kyoto, the rainforests of Brazil. Yet, when he spoke of those places, it wasn't the landscapes that lit his eyes. It was the people. "You can tell 1,000 stories with a single gaze," he said one morning, the sunlight playing across his face. "But only if you look long enough to see it." Isabella smiled softly. "And what story do you see when you look at me?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "A woman who's still learning that it's okay to be loved." Her breath caught. For a moment, the world seemed to still. Only the sound of the sea filled the silence between them. She looked away, painting brush trembling in her hand. "You don't know me, Ethan." "Maybe not," he said gently, "but I see you. And sometimes that's more honest than knowing." That evening, he convinced her to walk with him down the beach. The sunset was spilling gold over the water, and the wind carried the scent of salt and jasmine. They walked barefoot along the shore, their footsteps sinking into the cool sand. Ethan carried his camera, but he never lifted it. "Some things," he said, "are too sacred to capture." When the last light dipped below the horizon, Isabella stopped. "I used to believe in forever," she murmured. "Now I just believe in the moment." He turned to her, his voice deep, sincere. "Then let this moment be ours." She looked up, and for the first time she didn't run. That night she couldn't sleep. His voice echoed in her mind, gentle but insistent. His presence had begun to fill the spaces she thought were empty forever. It terrified her, the way he made her heart remember what it had sworn to forget. But beneath that fear, something tender bloomed, something fragile and real. The next morning she stood before a blank canvas. For years, her paintings had been echoes of the past, sorrow disguised as art. But today, her hands moved differently. She painted the color of the sea at sunset, the warmth of a smile, the wildness of wind through hair. She was painting him, Ethan Knight, the man who painted with light, the man who saw beauty not in perfection, but in the scars she tried to hide. And somewhere between the brushstrokes, she realized she wasn't running anymore. The mornings in Amalfi began to taste different for Isabella Hart. There was a sweetness in the air that wasn't from the sea breeze or the lemon trees. It came from something invisible. The quiet, growing presence of a man who had slipped into her life like sunlight through curtains. Ethan Knight had become a rhythm she didn't know she needed. He would appear each morning, camera in hand, smile on lips, and that familiar warmth in his eyes, the kind that made even silence feel safe. Sometimes he'd bring her espresso and almond pastries. Sometimes he'd just bring laughter that filled the still corners of her world. And every time, Isabella felt her walls falling, not with a crash but with a sigh. One golden afternoon, He invited her to join him on a photography trip through the coast. "You spend your days painting the sea," he said, his voice low and persuasive. "But have you ever seen it through someone else's eyes?" She hesitated. "I don't travel much anymore." Ethan smiled. "Then let me show you what the world looks like when you stop running from it." The next morning, they set out along the cliffs in his vintage black convertible, the kind that looked like it belonged in an old Italian film. The wind tangled her hair, the sunlight brushed her cheeks, and for the first time in years, Isabella laughed, freely, beautifully. The sound of it startled even her. Ethan glanced sideways at her, his lips curving. "That laugh," he said softly, "is a masterpiece no camera could ever capture." She turned to him, smiling shyly, her heart doing that dangerous thing, believing. They stopped at a hidden cove where turquoise waters kissed pale sand. Ethan climbed down the rocks first, then reached out his hand to her. She hesitated for a heartbeat before placing her delicate fingers in his. His touch was warm, grounding, the kind of touch that didn't demand. It simply waited. As they walked along the water's edge, he began photographing everything. The shells, the driftwood, her footprints beside his. "You see," he said, showing her the camera screen, "beauty isn't in the grand things, it's in the quiet proofs that we were here." She looked at the photo, their footprints fading in the tide, and felt her chest tighten. "Then I suppose love is the same," she whispered. "Something you only see clearly once it's already leaving." Ethan's voice softened. "Then maybe it's time someone showed you what love looks like when it stays." They sat beneath an olive tree that afternoon, the world hushed around them. He took her paintbrush, dipped it into the seafoam she'd collected earlier, and traced a faint line on her wrist. "You paint to heal," he murmured, "but you've forgotten how to live inside the colors you create." Isabella met his gaze, intense, endless, the kind of gaze that saw through the armor she had worn for years. "And you?" she asked. "What do you live for, Ethan?" His reply came quietly, almost reverently. "For moments that make me forget the camera's there. Like this one." Her breath caught. He wasn't just flirting. He was speaking in the language her heart had forgotten how to understand. That evening, as the sky turned violet and the first stars trembled awake, they sat on the beach, bare feet buried in the cool sand. The waves moved closer with every tide, like the sea itself was listening to them. "I used to love someone," Isabella confessed softly. "And when it ended, I promised myself I'd never love again. Because love, it always leaves you with less than you began with." Ethan reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No," he said gently. "Love doesn't leave you empty. It teaches you how full your heart can be, even when it breaks." She looked at him then, really looked. And in that gaze, the silence between them melted. The stars reflected in her eyes, and for the first time, Isabella didn't see fear there. She saw surrender. When he leaned closer, the world blurred into something timeless. The sound of waves, the salt on her lips, the whisper of his breath, everything slowed. He didn't kiss her right away. He waited, patient, reverent, as if asking her heart for permission. And then, finally, she closed the distance. It was not a kiss of hunger, but of recognition, soft, deep, the kind of kiss that tells stories, of pain healed, of walls falling, of souls remembering they were never meant to live apart. When they pulled away, she felt the world differently. The sea roared louder, the stars burned brighter, and her heartbeat, once locked away, was alive again. Ethan smiled, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You don't have to run anymore, Isabella." And with a trembling breath, she whispered, "Maybe I don't want to." That night, she fell asleep to the sound of waves outside her window, and for the first time in years, her dreams weren't haunted by loss. They were filled with light, with laughter, and with a man who had caught her heart, not to cage it, but to set it free. For weeks, their lives blended into something that felt like poetry. Days painted in sunlight, nights whispered under stars. Ethan and Isabella had found a rhythm that existed beyond words. They didn't plan it, they simply fell into it, like two waves meeting on the same shore. Every morning began with coffee and laughter in the courtyard of Luna Art, where he'd tease her for the way she wrinkled her nose when she concentrated on her painting. Every evening ended with long walks by the sea, the air between them glowing with something fragile and infinite. Love had stopped being a stranger. It had become the air she breathed. And yet happiness, when it comes after a long season of silence, can be the most fragile of all. One afternoon, Isabella returned from the market to find Ethan standing by the window of her gallery. He was staring out at the horizon, the same horizon she had once used to hide her loneliness. But in his eyes now there was something different, a quiet storm. "Ethan," she called softly. He turned, and the smile he gave her didn't reach his eyes. "I got a call," he said. "An offer from National Geographic. They want me to lead a 6-month photography expedition through the Andes." The words hung between them like heavy rain clouds. "Oh," she managed, her voice small. "That's incredible." He stepped closer, searching her face. "Is it?" She forced a smile. "Of course. This is what you've always dreamed of." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I thought I had already found what I was dreaming of." Her breath trembled. "Don't say that." "Why not?" he said gently. "You're the reason I even remembered what beauty felt like." She turned away, her eyes burning. "You should go, Ethan. You belong to the world, not to me." He shook his head. "I belong where my heart beats the loudest." "And hearts change," she whispered, her voice breaking. "When you've been away long enough, they always do." That night, neither of them slept. The moon hung low, casting silver light through her window, while she sat at her easel, painting furiously. Strokes wild and desperate. Her brush trembled as tears blurred the lines. She was painting the sea again. But this time it wasn't calm. It was wild, endless, untamed, a reflection of the storm inside her. When Ethan entered quietly, he didn't speak. He simply stood behind her, watching her heart spill across the canvas. Finally, she stopped. "You should pack," she said hollowly. "You'll miss your flight." "I don't care about the flight," he said. "I care about you." She turned, eyes glistening. "And what happens when you're gone? When I'm here alone again, painting ghosts and pretending I don't miss you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then I'll come back." "How can you promise that?" He took a step closer, his voice low, steady, aching. "Because love isn't a place, Isabella. It's a person, and I've already found mine." The next morning he left. The sound of his car fading down the cobblestone street felt like the closing of a chapter she didn't want to end. Days became weeks. She tried to drown herself in her art, but every canvas seemed to echo him. The curve of his smile, the warmth of his touch, the way his eyes saw through every layer she'd built to protect herself. Letters came from distant lands, handwritten, smelling faintly of the cedar cologne he always wore. He wrote of mountains and skies so vast they felt infinite, but every word ended the same way: "None of it is beautiful without you." And yet, as time passed, fear began to whisper again. That cruel, familiar voice that told her love always leaves, that people always change, that distance kills what words cannot keep alive. One evening, she received no letter. Then another week passed and another. Her chest felt hollow. Her mind tried to be logical. Perhaps the letters were delayed. Perhaps he was somewhere remote. But her heart knew the truth it didn't want to speak. In her loneliness, she walked to the cliff's edge, the same place she had painted from when they first met. The wind tangled through her hair as she stared at the endless sea, its rhythm echoing her ache. "Was I foolish," she whispered to the waves, "to believe love could stay?" A single tear slid down her cheek, glimmering in the dying sunlight. She closed her eyes, letting the wind carry her words away. Maybe I was never meant to be caught. But what she didn't know was that at that very same moment, miles away, Ethan stood beneath a foreign sky, holding a photograph of her smiling by the sea. His heart beat with one certainty: he was coming back. That night, Isabella painted again, not to forget him but to remember. Her brush moved softer this time, not in sorrow but in faith, because deep down, something told her, when love is real, it doesn't disappear. It simply finds its way home. Winter had come to Amalfi. The sea had lost its summer shimmer, now glistening in shades of steel and pearl. The wind carried the scent of rain and longing, sweeping through the narrow streets like a memory that refused to fade. Isabella Hart stood inside her gallery, surrounded by her latest paintings. Each canvas told a story, of waiting, of distance, of faith that trembled but never broke. Her brush no longer moved in sorrow but in quiet strength. The woman who once ran from love had learned something precious: that love doesn't die in absence. It deepens in silence. And yet, her heart still ached for him, for Ethan Knight, the man who painted with light and had shown her how to live in color again. It had been 6 months. 6 months of letters that came less often, 6 months of sunsets she watched alone. Every night she would walk to the cliffside with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, the cold wind kissing her skin as she whispered his name to the waves. The town had begun to notice her again. Tourists came to see her art, paintings filled with oceans and stormlight, faces half hidden behind color and emotion. One of the local papers even called her collection the language of waiting. But Isabella didn't paint waiting. She painted love, love that endures, even when it hurts to believe. One evening, the sky turned gold and rose, melting into the sea. Isabella locked up her gallery early, walking down to the harbor to watch the fishing boats return. The sun dipped lower, the air soft with sea spray, and just as she turned to leave she heard it, a voice behind her, low, familiar, breathless, still chasing sunsets without me. Her heart froze. She turned, and there he was. Ethan stood a few feet away, the golden light painting him in shades of home. His hair was longer, his skin kissed by foreign suns, and around his neck hung the same camera she remembered. But his eyes, they were the same. Warm, storm gray, and filled with everything he had ever left unsaid. For a moment she couldn't breathe. You. Her voice broke. I thought. He took a step forward, his voice trembling with emotion. I know. The letter stopped. The storm in Peru destroyed half our equipment. I had to stay longer to rebuild the project. But not a single day went by that I didn't think of you. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You promised you'd come back. He smiled, soft, broken, real. And here I am. I told you, love finds its way home. She stood still, afraid that if she moved, the moment would vanish. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, worn, creased, kept close to his heart. It was of her, standing by her gallery window, sunlight in her hair. I carried this with me everywhere, he said. Whenever I felt lost, I looked at it. You were my compass, Isabella. Her breath shuddered. Why did you come back, Ethan? He stepped closer until the world around them blurred into just the sound of waves. Because I realized something. The world is full of beauty, mountains, deserts, oceans. But none of it means anything without someone to share it with. You were never my muse, Isabella. You were my home. Something inside her finally broke open, not with pain, but with relief. All the waiting, the fear, the nights spent whispering his name. It all led to this moment. Without thinking, she closed the distance between them and fell into his arms. The world seemed to exhale. The sea roared in celebration, gulls cried overhead, and the sun poured its last light over them like a blessing. He held her tightly, his hand cradling the back of her head, his breath trembling against her hair. You're real, he whispered. I kept dreaming this moment. I was so afraid I'd wake up and lose it again. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes glistened like morning dew. You didn't lose it. You just had to come home to find it. And then she kissed him, softly, tenderly, like every goodbye they never said was rewritten into forever. Later that evening, they returned to Luna Art. The gallery glowed with golden light, the scent of paint and jasmine still lingering. Ethan walked through, taking in her new works. The stormy seas, the breaking light, the figures reaching for something beyond the canvas. These, he murmured, awe in his voice, hear us. She smiled gently. I painted every moment I missed you, every hope that refused to die. He turned to her, brushing his thumb over her cheek. Then let's start a new collection. Together. A month later, the gallery reopened with a new exhibition, Caught by Love. The walls shimmered with stories, photographs and paintings side by side, his light and her color, his journeys and her heart. Visitors walked through unaware that the art before them was born from a love that had once run from itself. And then been found. And at the center of the room, beneath the golden light, stood a single canvas, a woman standing on a cliff, her hair tangled in the wind, her eyes turned toward the horizon. The plaque beneath it read, she was running from love, until he caught her heart. As the night settled over Amalfi, Isabella and Ethan stood outside hand in hand, watching the moon ripple across the water. She rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, You really did catch me, didn't you? He smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. No, Isabella, you let yourself be found. And in that quiet, shimmering night, the sea sang softly, the song of two hearts that had finally come home. After years of hiding behind silence, of painting her pain in colors no one could understand, Isabella Hart finally learned that love was never the enemy. It wasn't the storm that broke her. It was the shelter she never dared to trust. Love had been chasing her all along, through every heartbreak, every lonely night, every quiet prayer whispered to the sea. And when she finally stopped running, it caught her not to trap her, but to teach her how to breathe again. Ethan Knight didn't save her. He reminded her that she didn't need saving, only remembering. Remembering that love is not meant to be perfect, it's meant to be true. It's not about who stays without question, but who leaves and still finds their way back. Not because they have to, but because their heart knows where it belongs. In the glow of her gallery, under the soft hum of ocean wind, Isabella's story became more than art. It became testament, a reminder that sometimes the things we run from are the very things that set us free. Because love, real love, doesn't ask you to change who you are. It simply waits, patiently, endlessly, until you are ready to be found. And when that day comes, when love finds you standing still, breath trembling, heart open, you'll understand what Isabella did, that love doesn't arrive with thunder or fireworks. It comes softly, in the warmth of a smile, in the silence between two heartbeats, in the moment you stop running and finally turn around. She was running from love, until he caught her heart. A story of fear, faith, and the beauty of surrender, only on Veiled Narrative Stories, where every emotion finds its voice, and every heart finds its home.